I enjoyed my share of Nintendo outside of Mario and Zelda, but this is the first time we've had a new Star Fox game since I became an adult, which is a weird thought to have. So, we're talking about Star Fox today, because when else are we going to have the chance to do that? This is the reboot I didn't exactly ask for, but I'll take it given my options. In fact, the entire time I was playing, I more or less went straight into whatever I could that might show me something new. To that end, the first 3 hours or so I was playing, I didn't even bother touching the main story mode. In fact, I jumped straight into the multiplayer and got a taste of what that was like, and much to my amusement, I was pleasantly surprised with what we got. I was a big fan of Star Fox Assault, largely in part to the sheer quantity of stuff it had going on. So taking that mentality into the equation, I had hopes, even if my expectations didn't match them. And what I found was a bit of a middle ground. The variety is there, but not incredibly robust. Having said that, what we have is just the right blend of chaotic that I keep coming back for more matches. As of writing, there are only 3 maps. Each one has its own game mode, and you don't get to choose when a match starts, so it's entirely random. The upside is you never find yourself waiting too long to be put into the matches themselves, so you'll be getting into things rather quickly. One map will take you to the ice plane of Pachina, where you'll have meteors falling around the place, and all 8 players will then rush in to shoot them before collecting their glowing cores to earn points. Whichever team manages to collect enough of these meteor cores earns even more points on top of that. Meanwhile, another map will take you to Corneria, where you have a King of the Hill battle, while the third is a Capture the Flag game mode involving space pirates that will shoot at you for trying to take their equivalent of the flag in Sector Y. And I do want to clarify before I get much further, doing the objective is not the only way to earn points. Taking down other players will get you a large portion of points, though it's comically dangerous as you're going up against other people, and meanwhile there's also some NPC fighters that fly around the arenas that occasionally shoot at the opposing teams. If you strike them down, you get some points as well, just not as many as if they're an actual person. Meaning, even if you aren't the most familiar with what's happening or the best at playing a particular map, you still have a means of contributing to the team. And real quick, I do want to mention that if you don't get enough players, bots can join the matches themselves and act as players, but you really don't notice it aside from the game telling you. There were plenty of times I was playing that I found myself ducking and weaving from what I thought was another player, only to learn I'd actually get struck down from the bots, and vice versa. They're surprisingly competent at what they're doing. Some other details that are nice to see to keep matches from being overwhelming include things such as every time you respawn, an item will be positioned nearby you. Whatever you get is bound to be helpful in some way, so you don't need to dread the other team grabbing all the good stuff and dominating the field. Speaking of which, in the event you're doing particularly well, the respawn timer can go from 6 seconds to upwards of 11. This gives the other team time to catch up and be able to make some level of progress before you get back in there. I know some folks may not enjoy the comeback mechanics like this, however, I'd argue the way the matches are paced, what's here feels cleverly done. You can of course play exclusively with friends if you like, and there's even a customizable banner that you can decorate with various unlocks that you earn from either the story, amiibos, or multiplayer. Now, don't worry, there's other modes I want to talk about in this review besides the multiplayer. But before I do that, I do want to point out the controls. Believe it or not, they feel really good. Though, like a lot of Nintendo games, customization, it feels limited. On one hand, you can invert the Y-axis on each vehicle like normal, and you can enable what's called combo inputs, where instead of only using the D-pad to do loops or U-turns, you can hit the X button with up or down to do either respective motion. While this is fine for those of us who have muscle memory of the older games, this feature can get you killed in multiplayer if you aren't careful. I would very much recommend reserving this for only the campaign, because I can't begin to tell you the amount of times I accidentally throw out a somersault in multiplayer then get shot down. Aside from that, the worst thing I can say about the controls is that you can't change the inputs for shoot or using a bomb. If I could just swap those around, that would be so much better. The A button is shoot by default, the Y button is your smart bombs. If I could just use Y for shoot instead, I feel like that would fix all my problems, because as of right now, there's no way to change that. Back to the game itself, I wanted to focus on another new addition, the Holo Viewer. This is essentially your codex or lore book, which provides a deeper glimpse into the universe of Star Fox. As a means to add some replay value, the entries filling out the Holo Viewer are unlocked by completing stages in the story and finishing challenges in its respective mode. I wouldn't say there's anything in here that's mind-bending, but it is nice to see the devs leaving notes that could be used down the line if somebody wanted to build upon what's in here. Challenge mode makes its return once again, but I personally don't see myself going very far with it. Entries of the Holo Viewer are locked behind it, so there's at least some motivation to give it a whirl, but since this is my third time playing through the entirety of Star Fox 64, I'm alright. I'm glad that it's here for anyone that's starving for Star Fox, but I personally have been ready for the envelope to be pushed forward for over 2 decades now. On a much nicer note, the story itself is a lot more involved this time around. It hasn't been completely reinvented, but the amount of new cutscenes here adds some much needed banter among the cast of characters. Branching paths were always a focus in the original game, and a nice touch that the team has added is that the banter can deviate depending on what you do. For instance, say you do the requirement in Sector Y to reach Aquis. The characters will then mention that they can head to either Aquis or Katrina while discussing the strategic advantages of tackling either mission. Or say you fail to meet the requirements in Zonus to reach Sector Z. Slippy will then make a comment at the end of the stage saying, "Aw man, it sure would have been nice if we could have done this, blah blah blah." However, if you manage to do it successfully, he'll then make a comment about the plan itself saying, "Aw man, I wouldn't want to swim in this dump." So what I mean to say is, the narrative hasn't changed from the original, but there's just a lot of personality behind it that wasn't there before. Lastly, just to quickly throw it in there, first-person mode has finally returned, so for any of you who were disappointed that I was absent from the 3DS version, rest assured, you have it once again. So with all that in mind, I give Star Fox 2026 an 8 out of 10. The game does exactly as advertised, which is bringing back a certified classic with modern technology, and I can't fault it for that. However, I do wish there was 1 or 2 more things to mess around with in the multiplayer, since I loved what I got. I simply want more, since that's where I'm going to be spending most of my time in this version. I'm really hopeful we can see a proper continuation in the coming years after this, because this is a solid jumping on point for the series. That's gonna do it for this review. If you're still here, thank you so much for sticking around to the end, and as always, I'll see you in the next video. Till then, everybody.